those few paragraphs in the Catechism are offensive to our generation. They are offensive. Because we do not want to believe that God, who is all good and all loving, could possibly send anyone to hell. And the truth of the matter is, He does not send anyone to hell. We managed to do that all on our own. On the contrary, He has done everything possible to bring us to heaven. You know, again, I apologize. I've been with you more than 2 years, so you've heard all my sermons. So if you've been to a funeral that I've offered, you've heard most of this sermon, but there's a few details I leave out in the funeral sermons. In my line of work as a priest, I get to meet a lot of people who have died and lived to tell about it. You know, the beyond and the back, the tunnel, the light, all that sort of thing. And I will never forget the first time that I heard one of those stories. I'd read a book by a fellow named John Moody called Life After Life. And it was just a wonderful book. It was not religion, theology, philosophy. It was case histories of people who had been revived and had one of those near-death experiences. You know, the tunnel and the light. You see them all the time on television. Maybe that happen. Every time I preach, somebody comes up and says, you know, that happened to me, that happened to somebody I know. You know, tunnel the light. Well, this fellow came up to me. I read this book, and of course, having read the book, I was an expert. And so I had a talk to give to a women's group in the morning, and I blended together what I thought these experiences of life after death meant in the view of our faith as Christians in life after death. So I gave the talk, and the gentleman came up to me. He's about this tall, and his wife was about that short, and put out his hand in very firm handshake, and he said, "Father, I want to thank you for everything you said. It's all true, I know, because I died." I took a step back, and his wife looked up at me and said, "Father, he's not crazy. He dropped dead of a heart attack at home, and we didn't get him revived until we got his body to the hospital." He told me this wonderful story. There, he's floating on the ceiling, looking at his body on the floor, and his wife is hysterical. I remember thinking how old he was. He was about 52. Of course, now I am significantly older than that, but, well, he was a young man, 52. His body's on the floor, and his wife is hysterical. His kids are calling the emergency number, and he's up floating on the ceiling looking at this thinking, I feel fine. What's everybody upset about? I always think if I'd been floating on the ceiling, I would have had some questions, but he was good with it. Well, he said he was drawn through this dark tunnel, but it wasn't frightening. It reminded him of the psalm we just sung. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. He was a believer. He knew the Lord. He was in good shape. He felt perfectly safe. And he came out on this place of light. He said it was a city of light, but it wasn't a city and it wasn't light. And there was Jesus standing in front of it, a person of perfect light and love. And he said something that touched me so deeply. He said, not only when we go to heaven, not only do our prayers rise to heaven and form one prayer before God, he said that when we pray from our heart, our very spirits stand before God and form one spirit. And he said, in the midst of all that beauty, he heard one prayer that bothered him. It was his wife saying, God, you got to send him back. He doesn't get out that easily. And so the Lord looked at him and said, your work in the world isn't done. You have to go back. And with great suffering, he turned and passed back through that tunnel and entered his body. And I've heard a number of people say this, that it doesn't hurt to die. It hurts to come back to life. And he said that when he was laying on the table in the emergency room, and when he got enough air in his lungs, he shouted, why didn't you leave me there? And he wouldn't talk to his wife for 3 days. He was so mad. Now, this is a powerful woman who can pray you back from the dead, believe me. Talk about the little woman. Well, after 3 days, he got around to living again, and beautiful story. I've told that story at least 1,000 times, and as I say, so often someone will come up. Now, these are the stories I don't tell at funerals. I have a very dear friend who was, well, he was the brother of a very dear friend, and I guess he was a dear friend too. He had heart of gold and brains of tin. He was involved in the Mexican import trade and the used car business. You catch my drift. Drugs and stolen cars. He was killed in a gang fight, and they managed to sew his liver back together. And I remember he was talking to two of his little nephews, and he said, "Oh, that stuff about the light in the tunnel, it's all nonsense." He didn't say nonsense. He said, "It's all nonsense. I was dead. There was nothing." And he came up to me afterwards, and he never called me father, going, "Simon, that's not true. I was in hell." I met a number of people who said that. I remember one kid, also a drug dealer. He was just 17 when I was in Humboldt Park, and he died under very suspicious circumstances, and they got him revived at St. Mary's Hospital. And he said that he had this experience that he found himself sinking into darkness. And he could see Jesus in the distance in a light, and he said, "Give me another chance." His family were all devout. He was just the one lost. Well, he woke up on the emergency room table at St. Mary's, and after that he became pretty devout. Everybody wants to hear about the nice stories, and I've got thousands of them, and don't worry, I'm almost done. Well, I don't know if I'm almost done. Everybody wants to hear the nice stories, not the not nice stories, because that's the insult. How could a God who is good and loving do this? Remember I mentioned the guy who said the first guy, he said there was a judgment. The thing that bothered him about it was that he knew the answers before he was asked the questions. And I wonder if that isn't what it means to experience timelessness. There comes a moment in our life when time stops, and we can say, as God said to Moses, that we are who we are. You know, babies. This is another thing that bothers people about Catholicism. Original sin. I mean, how can a sweet, kind, loving, beautiful little baby be guilty of original sin? Have you never been a parent? My earliest memory is I was going to torment my cousins. I was 2 years old and was mad, and I was going to make them pay, and I had a tantrum. That's my earliest memory. Babies are complete narcissists, aren't they? They're complete egotists. You might have to get up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. Doesn't matter. That baby wants something at 3, the whole house is awake. The cry of a baby is a cry that can penetrate brick. You know, if a baby has a bottle in his mouth, a change of clothes, and mommy holds him, he's fine. A baby lives in a world of one. Well, I know people who are 50 and 60 years old who, if they have a bottle in their mouth, a change of clothes, and mommy holds them, they are fine. We are born into this world in a state of absolute isolation. We are the gods of our own universe. And if when we die, that's who we are, that's who we will be forever. God sends no one to hell. We manage to do that ourselves by living in absolute egotism and self-centeredness.